But Dabby Dude!
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to another Ipace Driver show with myself, Garry and I, Ipace owner, and
I'm Abu Dhabi Dude, and I'll stick to hello. It's easier.
yeah, that's probably easier, isn't it? A lot easier. We haven't got much to talk about this show, have we?
There's hardly anything going on in the last few weeks.
Nothing at all. It's been really quiet since the last time we were on. I mean, it's a few weeks actually, months actually. I think since
Actually,
we
yeah.
did another last show. I mean, it's lots going on, so it's been a bit busy for me. I've been moving and all sorts of things. So yeah, that's part of the reason. But no, we've had a lot happening. And I suppose probably we ought to kick off by talking about the big news of the last couple of weeks. This whole new strategy from the new CEO of JLR, Thierry.
Indeed.
So you did a really good show on this. I thought your views on it on your channel were very, very good.
Thank you.
but basically what's happened is that we've got this new strategy from the new CEO of JLR, which is basically to electrify both parts of the business, but more so on the Jaguar side, where it's going to go to become a pure electric vehicle manufacturer in a few years' time. Obviously that doesn't mean they'll stop production of the stuff they've already producing. It just means there's no new models coming, which so all new models will be fully electric, and it's probably going to be a little way down the pipe before we start seeing those models, because they've pulled the plug on the only one they actually had in production or in development with the XJ. Let's start with that. I mean, the XJ was pretty well on the path. We'd seen test mules. I'd seen quite a lot about the test mules and how they were going on, and I'd actually seen one in real life.
Yeah. I'd had a lot of feedback on them as well from people who had either driven them or were involved in it, and it was getting, people were raving about it.
Yeah, they thought it was a great car. I mean, it had compromises because the platform was a shared platform with Land Rover. And it wasn't a pure EV platform. It was an EV stroke hybrid platform. So it had to allow for petrol engines and diesel engines and generators and all sorts of things they were talking about putting into it, which I think was, and from what I've heard, there may have been a compromise or two too far in that direction.
As I said in my video, that's the same feedback I'd had, that basically, while it was a great vehicle, the tech, the interior, the exterior, everything was brilliant. Quite a few people just felt that those compromises, shall we say, and that the platform required just pushed it into an area that they didn't want the XJ to be in.
Yeah, and I think that actually would have affected the price of the XJ, its range, all the things which are really important, and exactly. where the competitors are now is pushing the boundaries on what Jaguar could achieve with the XJ at a reasonable price. Although
That's the key phrase. We'll come back to that.
We'll come back to prices in a minute. But I think the other thing about the whole XJ thing is that's not a waste. I mean, people think, they pulled the plug on the XJ, it's a complete waste. They've wasted all that time. But that platform is going to form part of Land Rover's strategy.
Exactly.
I mean, basically, the platform was being developed very much for Land Rover in the latter parts of the stages, and that's what was pulling it away from being a pure.
And even Jaguar will have gained something from it. There was, there's still a level of BEV development going into that XJ, which they will take parts of, even though the car itself might not come to light of day. There's elements of it will be used in the J-Pace, or
if there is a J-Pace, we don't know that for
indeed,
certain. I mean, that wasn't actually mentioned in the strategy call.
No, it's very light on detail, actually.
Yeah. So lots of new models and. The light's just gone off in this room. Oh, never mind.
I wonder what happened.
I you can still see me. I think we might just had a minor power cut, but on one of our rings. But anyway, never mind. The strategy is basically all new models. Basically, so this is the thing we've talked about this a bit off air, but it's a high-end strategy. The idea is to move Jaguar up market almost to compete with Aston Martin, which I'm not sure about that as a strategy.
Even Aston Martin can't compete with Aston Martin.
But yeah, I know. It's I mean, yes, there is an all-electric market which is with people with money to spend. I mean, us early adopters have to be that. But I mean, I'm slightly concerned that I won't be able to afford a Jaguar electric car going forward.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously haven't gone into pricing details, but as soon as you start talking about high-end, low volume,
Yeah.
You effectively limit the sort of economy of scale that you can get by volume manufacture. So therefore, it instantly pushes the prices up, even if, with everything else remaining the same. If you're not a volume manufacturer, and I know they're not high volume now, but vehicles like the XE, even the Ipace to a certain extent, they help push the volumes higher and keeps the prices down for their third-party suppliers. Things like the Touch Pro and the Touch Pro Duo equipment would be a lot more expensive for Jaguar if it was only in the Ipace.
Yeah.
But because it's across the range, they can buy them at a much cheaper price.
Yeah.
And the same applies to every other piece of kit in the car, from the seats.
Absolutely.
To
but
the
then again,
wheel.
I guess the counter to that is if they go for a single electric platform, which is kind of what they've been talking about, to do all the different models.
Yeah.
A stretchable platform, so obviously you can do different body sizes.
Yeah.
Then you do get those economy of scales across all these shorter run, smaller run vehicles.
Indeed, yeah.
So
I mean, it may mean that the pricing ends up not being affected too much if the cost of their third-party suppliers, for example, goes up, but the cost of their in-house chassis production, shall we say, just for want of a better word, goes down. It could end up balancing out, but I realistically, I think we're talking a higher average price for a Jaguar car going forward.
And we've already seen that in the luxury end of the EV market. I mean, we were talking about Audi just off air, weren't we? I mean, that's a very high cost car to start with, over 100k to start with, effectively.
Indeed. So, I mean, everybody prior to the launch, I was one of the few people that said otherwise, actually, but a lot of people were saying prior to the launch, oh, it's going to be a more affordable Taycan. And I was one of the few that said, I think it's going to be more expensive than the Taycan.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, its starting price is higher than the Taycan starting price, and the top end is higher than the Taycan top end.
Yeah. But it's a nice looking car. I mean,
it's a beautiful car, but it's expensive.
It's expensive, but that's the sort of thing that Jaguar's got to compete with now. I mean, there are. I mean, up until when we've spoken years ago, when we started the show, there wasn't that much competition out there. But now there's a lot out there. I mean, we've got the Mustang Mach-E, the launch of that recently. I mean, how Ipace is that car?
I know. I mean, they've even, like, when they're talking about it, when you watch the Ford presentations on the car, they talk in the same way that Ian Callum used to talk about the Ipace. They talk about its hornshoes and, all those same kind of key
panoramic roof and the FO and even down to the same position of charge port.
Indeed, yeah.
It's really, it's almost like what car can we copy? Oh, the Ipace looks quite good. It's doing quite well. Let's copy that and make it cheaper.
Indeed, yeah. And they have. Well, I mean, it is Ford, in fairness. But,
yeah, it is. Yeah, but having said that, I mean, it looks a great car. I mean, range looks good. The performance looks reasonable. Technology looks good. Obviously, it's got the Ford Sync thing, which is now going to be Android Auto powered. Yeah, as in Android Auto for car. That's not the one you run on your phone, which is the one that Polestar, which after a rather tricky start seems to have got sorted. I mean, I watched the Polestar forums and there were a lot of people really upset about the Polestar software initially, but it seems to have settled down and it seems to be working okay now. Yeah. Hopefully. Certainly haven't heard the cries of despair I was hearing a few months ago. So that's a good thing, I think, and it's actually an interesting one from the Jaguar point of view. They're still sticking with PP Pro. They've got something which is in-house effectively. Need to have a development team. Need to have all this stuff associated with it, which is a high cost and high difficulty of maintaining something which is actually a low volume product effectively in the software world. Exactly,
it is. However, I do feel, I mean, for someone like Ford, it makes eminent sense. I'm not so sure that it was a great brand move for Polestar. For someone like Ford, volume manufacturers, it does make a great deal of sense. But if you're trying to put yourself at that higher end, you need something that stands out from everyone else. And if you've just got the same operating system as everyone else has, The question is.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see that the trade-off between that. The only problem is if you do go for your own operating system, you've got to have something that works. And I think that's something else we'll come on to talking about, because we'll talk about model year 21, because we haven't discussed that really much. But
no, indeed,
but
it was one of the things that I really liked from Thierry's presentation was he, towards the end of it, he spent a lot of time emphasising the digital connected software engineering side of the business. In fact, he actually went so far as to describe them as a tech company at one point. And it's good to see, because, well, for me, the focus needs to be on the car and on the driving experience, and that's what sold the Ipace to me in the first place, really, was that it wasn't just an EV, it was a Jaguar.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we need to stay on brand in that sense, or they need to stay on brand in that sense. But you can't get away from the fact that cars are connected computers now. They're internet connected computers now. The driving experience still counts for a lot, but you don't get the software right, you lose a lot of people.
And also the software very much affects the driving experience now, and battery management, all that sort of stuff is a key part of the thing. I mean, it has been for years. I mean, the whole engine management systems, people just don't realise that the software has been such a key part of cars for a very long time. But a lot of people just don't get the software side, and certainly a lot of the traditional manufacturers don't get the software side and don't get it. Now, this is actually, I think, when Jaguar and the whole group have got a real advantage, because Tata is one of the biggest computer companies in the world. It's got an awful lot of very clever people working for it. I've worked with some of the consultants in the past, and some of those guys are absolutely amazingly brilliant, really clever guys. So if they can get that sort of resource available to them, and the group actually backs this vision and gives them the resources to get, say, Pivi Pro up to a standard where it needs to be working. I mean, I can't say I've been overly impressed with Pivi Pro so far, with the feedback I've got. I mean, it seems to be in some ways worse than what we've currently got in control on our systems, our older models. Certainly things like the profiles disappearing, and that seemed to be something they should have resolved.
I know. I mean, a lot of it is similar to the early teething problems we had with the Touch Pro Duo. We had problems like disappearing profiles, rebooting. There was the issue with the matrix headlamps, which came up at one point. That's crept back in again as well on the 21. So there's certain elements of it that we've already gone through, and it's a shame to see them creeping back in again. Yeah,
it's quality control. I mean, quality control at Magnum Distillery is really good. They really want to clamp down on stuff and get things out the door. But I think sometimes they're fighting bits of software which are not necessarily tested properly. I mean, testing vehicle software is really difficult. I mean,
it is.
The testing vehicle software for controlling components isn't so difficult. Testing vehicle software which interacts with people is always very difficult, because everybody interacts with it very differently.
But there are certain elements you feel they should have caught.
Yeah, I mean, they should have got.
Disappearing profiles, I can't believe that never came up. For example,
Yeah, and it seems to be such a sales point, but and especially when you start seeing some of the competitors and what they're doing, and some of the way that their software works, and the quality of some of the stuff. I mean, even people like Hyundai with the new Ioniq range. I mean, Ioniq 5 looks a good, really impressive car in terms of its tech, if nothing else.
Honestly, my personal feeling is from that launch. Sorry, we're going a little bit off topic now, but from that Ioniq 5 launch event. That's going to be one of the cars to beat.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, it's a big car. It's actually Ipace size. It's a real competitor. It is a real competitor. I mean, styling wise, maybe it's a. I mean, I know some people absolutely love the style of that, and I can certainly see why. Possibly not my taste, but it's still a really good car, and
it kind of looks to me like a Ford Mustang and a Cybertruck got a motel room together.
It does actually. That's a good description of it. But actually, it's interesting because I saw some of the in the flesh shots of one of the ones in blue rather than the silver, and it doesn't look the same. It looks much more conventional when you see it in a more conventional. But yeah, I mean, it's a very clever car in lots of ways.
I mean, the launch event vehicle is £45,000 after the government grant.
Yeah,
and it's got everything. It's got a solar panel on the roof now. I'm not sure how much benefit that's going to bring, but it's got the solar roof. It's got the augmented reality heads-up display, which is quite phenomenal technology from what I've seen. It's got all the whistles and bells on the inside, the heated seats, the heated steering wheel, the touch screens, the climate control, you name it. It's a very well spec'd vehicle. And okay, 45 grand isn't a car for the masses, but that specification in a fully electric car with a near enough 300-mile range.
It's a big car for 300-mile range. It's not like to get that economy on that's frontage of car, because it's an upright car. It's more upright than the Ipaces. It's got certainly more cabin space, so it's a very intriguing. But they are, I mean, Hyundai seem to be amazing at their efficiencies and stuff. So
they've been at that's been at the forefront of their game since they started in the battery vehicle space.
Well, they don't get everything right. They've got that big battery recall at the moment going on in the States on the LG batteries. So
nothing's perfect.
No, nothing's perfect. So
interestingly, what I read on that, and this actually segues into Jaguar I-Pace again, which a lot of people, and on the forums, a lot of people were critical about the charging curve on the I-Pace. Which uses the same LG cells as the Hyundai. And one of the things that's happened with the Hyundai is that obviously there's been a risk of battery fires, which is why they've been recalled for anybody that doesn't follow this stuff. So the e-Niro has been subject to a recall due to possible battery fires. And one of the things quoted by LG is that Hyundai have been their charging software is feeding into the battery outside of the recommendations that LG have in their specifications, which is partly what is causing them to overheat. And a lot of people in the past have seen people like Audi, Hyundai getting higher charging speeds, shall we say, or better charging curves, you could argue, than the I-Pace got. And all I think that's happened is that I-Pace or Jaguar have followed the rules.
Well, they followed the agreement they had with LG in terms of warranty. I mean, that's what, and I know they slightly renegotiated after model year 21, which again we'll come on to in a second. But for our vehicles, I think they followed the engineering basically. I mean, the engineers won on that one rather than the marketers. So. Whereas I think in Audi, the marketers probably won, and it's trade. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what does happen with the Audi e-tron, because they are doing the same, as you say, they're doing a fairly similar curve to the Hyundai we're doing with the so obviously Kia and Hyundai being basically part of the same group in terms of what they do. So with the e-Niro, that's basically got a similar charging curve to the e-tron's got, and so you wonder what sort of warranty can get.
I shifted onto the e-Niro there, didn't I? Sorry.
But basically the same, the Kona.
They're the same car, So.
Yeah, basically the same car, aren't they? Under the skin. So the e-tron obviously has been doing this faster charging curve. I know people in our group have said for a long time that might destroy the battery on the e-tron quicker than it should be, because it's well outside the criteria that LG set for that battery. We'll see. I mean, we'll have to see what goes on, but it's going to be interesting to see where we are with that.
I mean the Jaguar announcement, or the JLR announcement, should I say? What did you think of the actual presentation?
Oh, it's a typical Thierry presentation. Have you not seen any of his done for his previous?
I know.
Employees? I don't. I'm never that impressed with those sort of presentations anyway.
It was actually picking out what he was saying. I found quite difficult. And I'm just gonna for the people that haven't watched it, I'm gonna go over the points that I've picked out of it. I rewatched the presentation and went through a sort of list of points, if you like, to try and pin down exactly what he meant, because I found it quite difficult in places to fully understand what he was saying. There's a lot of management speak and buzzwords.
There's a lot of buzzwords in there, for definitely.
But my understanding of it was that Jaguar Land Rover, obviously the whole presentation was about the entire company going forward, but there were two very distinct strategies there. And that Jaguar was going to be pure electric by 2025. Now that wasn't electrified, that was electric.
Pure electric. Yes.
So now
pure
what he didn't go into detail
well.
on was my personal belief and my personal understanding, though he didn't cover this, is that the cars themselves will not all be electric from 2025 onwards. My belief is there will be an electric version of every Jaguar from 2025 onwards, and existing models will continue to be sold until they're phased out. If that makes sense.
So I've heard two things, which is one that only new models will be electric, and the existing models will be retained. So they won't sell any new, because he basically talked about new models in
exactly.
So and I've heard both that new models will be pure electric, and also that new models will be pure electric and potentially petrol hybrids, but that doesn't make any sense from the point of view of doing a pure electric skateboard design, which is what they were talking about. So it doesn't actually make sense to me. I think it's going to be pure electric from again. I know that I think the confusion has come because Jaguar and Land Rover are part of the same group, and Land Rover are doing a slightly different thing. I think that's where the confusion is coming. So I think my reading of this is that it's going to be a pure electric skateboard platform for Jaguar. Going forward, but there will be still XJs and XJs and things being sold alongside those.
That's basically what I was.
Not allowed to sell them anymore.
Exactly.
Which won't be that.
And as they bring out new models, those will gradually disappear, and it will, ultimately be an all electric brand. But from 2025, no more new model petrol diesel Jaguars, as I understand it. The Land Rover one was the one that was causing confusion, because a lot of people were discussing the Land Rover announcement as the Jaguar announcement, and vice versa. So Land Rover, which is Land Rover and Range Rover, obviously, they're talking about 6 pure electrics. The first one to come in 2024. Again, quite a few people homed in on that part of the presentation, said first electric vehicle in 2024. What about the Ipace? But that was a Land Rover model discussion at that point. So they will start from 2024 to electrify, but they won't be fully electric until 2036. In every model. And that makes sense to me, because Land Rover and Range Rover are a much more difficult model for the electrification program.
Absolutely. And we've already talked about the XJ platform, which the MLA platform, which will be a variant of that, will be the basis for Land Rover's strategy going forward. I expect to see these fully electric versions of the electrified platforms to be out. So basically, I think you will have a fully electric version on the same platform as you have a hybrid version. It's basically what the MLA plan was all along.
Exactly. They had two platforms for Land Rover: the MLA and the EMA. And then one platform for the Jaguar brand. That was a single skateboard modular. So it can be extended.
EMA is electrified modular architecture. I'm told, but that's not actually. I don't think that's actually been confirmed. So, but
he did mention it in the presentation, but whether whether it's something that sees the light of day or not.
But basically, we would expect Range Rovers and Land Rovers to be hybrids for a while, because they can build hybrids. They can do plug-in hybrids till 2035. So they've got a bit of leeway there to get those out. And we have to remember that although we tend to think UK-centric and maybe EU-centric, the rest of the world hasn't moved quite so fast on electrification as we have. There are still parts of the world where which are Land Rover's main market, where there are no plans for electrification. So they would be silly not to maintain some form of.
I mean, I don't know that we've reached a point in the world yet where United Nations vehicles can guarantee being able to plug in everywhere that they go, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, I mean, that's actually possibly one area where hydrogen might be an option. I mean, I think he mentioned hydrogen in the talk. I've never been a great fan of hydrogen for passenger vehicles, but for small passenger vehicles, buses and beyond, I think.
I can see a use case for it, but it's whether it's a big enough use case to justify the cost of developing and building them.
Yeah.
There are people. For example, there are high mileage drivers who don't have off-road parking.
Yeah.
For those, public charging infrastructure on battery electric vehicles can be tricky. I mean, it's undeniable that if you live in a block of flats with no charging facilities on site, and you're doing regular long distance drives, the sales rep, the traveling engineer.
Sales rep. Yeah, I mean, but that's where we get the high range cars coming in. So I mean, we are within 2 years we've got 500-mile range cars becoming fairly standard.
Yeah.
So I think that probably answers that question in terms of battery, and whether Jaguar need to be pushing that way as well. 200 miles is not going to be long enough for the fleet owners. But then again, from what they've said, that Jaguar's not aiming at the fleet owners anymore. So it's a
indeed, yeah. I mean. The Porsche Taycan wouldn't be a sales rep car either. So,
that's an interesting. I mean, because Ipace is actually a perfect size rep car if you had a bit more range.
Yeah. I mean, the hydrogen again on large vehicles, and even by large vehicles, I'm counting things like the Range Rover fleet. It depends on how many changes they're willing to make. At the end of the day.
But the other thing is, obviously, the other counter to hydrogen at the moment is the whole synthetic fuel debate as well, which again I don't think it's got the production levels of that are just so low that it's not really going to be practical for most people, but it could be practical for certain things.
I just my personal, like I say, I can see an argument for hydrogen, but I don't think it's a compelling enough argument to justify it in the light passenger vehicle space. There are edge cases where it does make sense, is what I was getting at. But those edge cases, there's always edge cases. There's edge cases where petrol doesn't make sense. Yep. If you live on an island somewhere without a petrol station, but is somebody going to build a whole car factory for those people? No,
not. I mean,
I think we're going to get to a point where the few people, and I'm talking relatively speaking, I know there's probably quite large numbers of people, but the relatively small number of people that do that kind of driving are just going to have to compromise, and businesses are probably going to have to get used to the fact that maybe the sales reps may be slightly less productive because they have to stop to charge during the day.
I must admit, one of my thoughts on that, because I know a few sales reps in the mileage they do and how tired those guys get driving. I mean, I've always thought they should be controlled the same way lorry drivers should be if they're doing something commercial. I mean, it's health and safety. It should be under the same sort of regs, I think.
Yeah.
It's not. But I think actually having to force them to take breaks is not actually a bad thing.
I agree. I completely agree. It's just a change of mindset that would be required.
But having said that,
driver monitoring coming in, driver state monitoring, drowsy drivers will be detected.
Yeah.
Cars will be nagging them to pull over and take breaks anyway.
Yeah, I think so. That's true. I mean, the other thing, of course, is we talked about the Hyundai launch, and one of the key things from those 800 volt charging, which I mentioned a few times on the show, the podcast I did, this lifestyle show, and that's quite key because that obviously speeds up the charge rates. And once we start getting 800 volt as the standard, which I think it is going to become, I would be unimpressed if JLR were not looking at 800 volts for the next platform.
Likewise.
Yeah. So,
but again, to drift back to that Ioniq, that was a remarkable announcement, which was hidden in amongst all the styling and all that, the style and the tech. But in all honesty, the actual 800 volt with the 400 volt converter technology is a massive leap forward. I mean, Porsche charge a fortune for that 400 volt.
I do. And just to have it thrown in is part of the cost of a 46,000 pound car, sub 40,000 for the base model potentially.
Exactly.
It's impressive, and obviously that's going to be across the board on the Ioniq range, from what I understand. So this new Ioniq 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 6 as well, I believe.
Yep.
That they're all going to be able to do this 800 volt charging, which is and that is when you start talking about the cells wrap, the fact that you can add that 100 miles in 15 minutes. If your next trip is only 100 miles away, a 15-minute trip, stop for a break, post meetup is not as big an issue as a half hour to an hour long break.
Exactly, in that 15 minutes, the sales rep can be writing up his notes from the last sales meeting.
Yeah.
You know.
And as long as the infrastructure is there to meet it, and of course the one advantage that Honda have got, and this is something I think JLR have got to get all sorted out now because everybody else is doing it, is the whole ionic thing. The Honda Ionity thing. Ionic, it's very confusing.
I know. They need to get the names sorted out.
Yeah. But the Ionity thing, Honda have obviously got that cheap Ionity deal. Although we don't know the full details of that, but it sounds like it's going to be the 24 pence a kilowatt or around that mark.
That's my assumption. If you buy an Ioniq 5, you get a 1-year subscription for no charge, which means you get the 24 pence, whatever it is, per kilowatt hour rate for a year without having to pay the roughly 20 quid a month subscription you would usually have to pay for that. Yeah. If you buy the Project 45, which is their version of the first edition, then you get 2 years subscription,
which is actually worthwhile.
And
but even with the £20 a month subscription, if you're a long distance driver, that's a huge saving. It's just
with a 40 pence per kilowatt hour price difference, more or less. In fact, it's a bit more than 40 pence, isn't it? Price difference. It doesn't take many charging stops to make up your 20 quid.
No, it certainly doesn't. And we know that Jaguar haven't got any plan, had no plans of being part of that. Whether that's changed, I don't know. But I think anybody who's not part of that is going to really struggle to sell cars in Europe.
Yeah,
because Ionity is now all pervasive in Europe everywhere you go.
Exactly, and I think if Jaguar is going to go down this luxury, low volume, high end market, although they're going to be selling to rich people. Rich people like a bargain.
They do.
And
that's why they're rich.
Exactly. You don't get to be rich by spending your money.
Yeah.
I mean, even though they're very high-end cars, that's the kind of benefit that high-end customers want to be seeing,
Yeah.
And not even just the cheap aspect of it, the simple aspect of it, of the plug and charge and the internal billing and all of that, adds to the luxury experience rather than standing around faffing with apps for 20 minutes.
Yeah. It's very much the case that I think that any car manufacturer now needs to, and I think we discussed high Ionity pricing.
Yeah.
And this has been the main driver of that pricing. It's not been actually targeting consumers; it's targeting the car manufacturers. It's making them sign up for Ionity, basically.
Exactly.
So I think eventually it will be. Now, the one thing I have heard on the Ionity side, and this is, I don't know where this has got to, was the whole EU investigation into Ionity as to what with the charging, and whether they will actually force a public subscription model. So you don't have to be in the car; you can just pay for the subscription. Which, if they did, I'd probably take up, to be honest. But
I mean, I wouldn't at the moment because I can't go anywhere. But
yeah, but once we can go again. But the other thing, if I was going to take it up, I want to see a lot more reliability on Ionity in the UK.
Yes.
At the moment, it's terrible.
It's atrocious. I mean, and I only noticed this after I'd edited and published the video, but the one I did, I can't remember when it was now, but I stopped at the new Ionity up at Perth. And it was only when I edited the video, it was a brand new station with 4 units, and one of them was out of service, on the day I was there. Okay, you've still got 3 units, but I can't remember the last time I pulled into a petrol station and 25% pumps weren't working.
Yeah, and it's not just the fact that sometimes they're not working. I mean,
it's the speed as well.
It's the speed. Yeah, I mean, Peter was. I would say that of the chargers, there's probably only ever 60% of them working. And they are working at low power. They very rarely get more than about 20-30 kilowatts on things. So yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah. So
I've had it at Gretna where I plugged in and was getting 42 kilowatts. I mean, one of the justifications for the high cost is the speed.
Yeah, Yeah. So that's tricky. I mean, there are some alternatives. I mean, obviously, one thing we haven't talked about since, because I don't think we've done a show since it's actually launched the whole GridServe thing. Which is amazing. The Braintree GridServe charging hub, which is
absolutely brilliant concept that's in the wrong place.
Yeah,
but there's more coming.
There are a lot more coming. Yeah, it's not in the wrong place for some people. Good for,
no.
For people in that area, actually filled a big hole in charging. So it's but yeah, so it's this whole concept of a service centre owned by GridServe, who with their own chargers in at 20 odd pence per kilowatt, and potentially a subscription model as well. I mean, the thing which gets me with their idea is this whole idea that you can basically take a contract hire car from them, and they will throw charging in all their chargers, which when they have the 150 odd chargers centres around the country, which they're predicting before 2022.
That's a phenomenal business plan.
Yeah, it is. It is really is. And they've got them. I mean, I was always fairly sceptical of GridServe. I mean, I interviewed them at Fully Charged Live. I thought it was a fantastic idea. I just didn't think they'd get the money, but they got the money.
I did not think they were coming, and I was frequently asking them loaded questions, worded very nicely.
Yeah.
Because while they were constantly publicising it, all you ever saw was computer renders.
Yeah.
And I was like, what stage have you reached now at the site? And what, because I honestly, in the back of my mind, I had strong doubts as to whether it was actually going to see the light of day.
But to be honest, perhaps we were a little faith, because they've done all this stuff with solar, and they've been very successful with solar farms, and they've got the funding for the solar farms. And Mr. Toddington, great name for someone doing service stations, who runs it, was very pro and very animated that he was going to get the EV stuff working, and they've delivered. And from what I understand, they're really waiting on decisions from planning at the moment for quite a few more sites to go live very rapidly.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, they published, I think, it's about another 12 sites so far that they've published, haven't they?
Yeah. And apparently what they've learned from doing the Braintree site is they reckon they can go from flat ground to fully up and running within 3 to 4 months, which is just phenomenal.
That's extraordinary. Yeah.
So
brilliant concept. I'd love to try it, but again,
can't travel at the moment.
But from what I've seen, and just the number of chargers, and it's a very rare thing to see a shared charging site with CCS public charging networks and Tesla superchargers. Yeah. And the Tesla superchargers are outnumbered.
Yeah, by the other CCS. What was interesting about that, I was discussing the whole GridServe thing with someone, and they said, but look at the slots. Like, why didn't they put in diagonals so people pull in? I said, well, that doesn't work for EVs, because we've got charge ports everywhere and anywhere where you end up blocking other people's charge ports. So they've actually allowed a huge amount of space beside each charger, so you can line up with your Ipace and you can get a charge. You can line up with your e-tron, you can get a charge, regardless of where that charge port is.
Theoretically even get in and out with a trailer.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, so I think they've really thought this through. They've done a really good job of it, and I'm very impressed, actually. I have to say.
Completely.
I think
and I did hear. Now I don't know if they ever went through with this, but I heard in the planning stage they were talking about the gym equipment, for example, the exercise bikes.
Yeah.
They were actually going to connect them up to little dynamos to add power. to the...
I haven't heard if they've done that or not. I mean, certainly they've got solar panels on top which they are charging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, something you mentioned earlier, and I just wanted to quickly go back to it, the whole solar panel on top of the Hyundai. I think one of the things that apparently does is trickle charge to 12 volt, which I think is a huge thing for EVs. Why EVs have still got 12 volt auxiliary batteries? It probably isn't 12 volt, it's probably 18 volt now, but why we still got auxiliary batteries on EVs? Well, I do know to some extent why, because it's a lot cheaper to have an auxiliary battery than it is to have the inverters and everything you need to do to power some of this low voltage equipment you've got.
However, it doesn't work as so many people have encountered. It just doesn't work as well as it does, sadly, in a combustion engine. I hate to say that, but where you've got the alternator constantly charging the battery every time it starts up, it just doesn't seem to suit the EV architecture the same. I know that I think I'm right in saying that Hyundai have said they're switching over completely to they're getting away from the lead acid 12-volt batteries and are switching over completely to lithium ion, I believe.
Yeah. So that will possibly be slightly better in terms of the way it charges and everything like that. But and certainly you won't have this issue where you get dropped low voltage and you can't do anything. So, but yeah, it does make you wonder why it's such a difficult thing to do. But I know they've just used standard old petrol equipment to do it. It's crazy. It's all about economies of scale and cost, and nobody's actually produced a EV specific battery technology for the aux batteries to stuff. But yeah, it's pain. I mean, and it's not just Ipace. I mean, so many cars have issues with this. I know quite a few MG drivers who've had lots of issues with their 12-volt dropping and not being able to drive the car. And
Andrew Till, if you watch his stuff on YouTube, Andrew Till is he's done a series of videos about his 12-volt battery issues on his e-Niro.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy that that's such a big problem for most cars. Even Tesla in the early days, 12-volt batteries were a big issue for them. So it's crazy that that's the case. But that's one of the things I quite like about having the solar roof, because if it does trickle charge the 12-volt, that's going to get around a lot of that issue.
That will help. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, if it does that on its own, it's worth it just for that, probably. So I'm not sure it's going to give you more from that charge because you haven't got much space. They've obviously it's going to be a very small solar cell. It's not going to be angled
correctly,
correctly towards the sun. At any time, really. No. So in terms of its potential compared to its actual efficiency.
Yeah, it's not going to be huge amounts of energy going in, but it's still nice. It's still nice to have some. So yeah, it's still good. So let's quickly talk, because we're running a bit long on the show, but let's quickly talk about the model year 21, because that's obviously I've got my own opinion on model year 21. I have still not to drive one. I've had I did have all sorts of things lined up before the whole pandemic thing got in the way.
You and me both.
To drive, but hopefully eventually I will get a chance to. But I mean, certain things they've done on that on year 21, which seem to actually catch a lot of my JLR contacts by surprise as well.
Same here.
So let's talk about the things that seem to have upset a few people, that and certainly makes me question whether I actually want a new generation of Ipace. So first thing is. So the one thing which I think most people agree is not a really big loss is they've taken away the parking assist from the model year 21.
Yeah.
So again, but some people are again up in arms about that because it wasn't mentioned in the original marketing for it. It was still being on the website for a while. That it was going to have
it was still on the configurator as being included.
Included and everything like that. But that's gone.
Yeah.
And as part of that as well, they've taken away the one bit which I really like.
I know what you're going to say. Sorry, I said.
No, it's fine. But I mean, this is, and people get confused by this, because every time I mention this, people say, "Oh, but the steering assist on the Ipace is useless." But they tend to think about the lane keep assist, which is pretty useless. I've never really understood why there's two systems actually. I mean, why there's a lane keep assist and a steering assist, which are completely different systems. But the lane keep assist is
don't understand it, and it's not well explained either.
No. I bet a lot of people just don't even know they've got it.
Indeed,
So basically, cruise assist, steering assist only happens when you're on adaptive cruise control on the Ipace, which is weird because on a lot of other cars it works all the time. I mean, the MG ZS EV, which is a really cheap car, has all the time steering assist, which actually works really well. But it's the same technology. It's just exactly the same chipset, so it should be feasible to have it working all the time. But anyway, so on the Ipace, it only works when you've got adaptive cruise control on, and it does keep you in the centre of the lane really well on A roads and motorways. I mean, I wouldn't definitely take it on B roads, and I wouldn't want to do it on back roads, but it works really well, and it works a lot better than a lot of the reviews from the early days said. Because a lot of people were comparing it with a lot of people were trying to compare against the Tesla and saying it wasn't as good as autopilot and all that sort of stuff, and it wasn't. It's not meant to be. It's not the same thing. But it works, and it does what it wants. It does what it says on the tin, and it worked extremely well for me on my long trip to Germany.
I agree. I use it all the time on my road trips, and it does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's not designed to use around town. It's designed for highway cruising. You just arrive a lot more rested and a lot less fatigued because you're not making the constant micro corrections that you don't even realize you're doing, really. you know, the car is taking care of that, but
Yeah.
you have to obviously still be hands-on and paying attention.
And it's always been said it's part of a driver assistance package, and I see that it is driver assistance. It's not something I couldn't do myself. But as you say, you arrive more rested, and I wouldn't really miss that. And it is missing from the model year 21. They took it away. They took it away to give 360 surround, which I think is crazy.
In all honesty, of given the two, I know which I would rather have. I have used, I mean, we discussed it before, I have used the 360 surround on the new model, and I found it pretty, you know, good looking, but I would much rather they would get the top down view fixed on, you know.
And they potentially could do that with software. I mean, things, the cameras are there, they just haven't got the software right. But yeah, I mean, and I think this is all about cost cutting with modules. I think that there's been a lot of small changes to the module 21, which all seem to be related to reducing cost. Some of which actually have advantages. I mean, one thing which has changed is the brake discs. The brake caliper setup, which now means the brake discs get cleaned quite regularly, which is quite a nice thing because they didn't used to, and they could go. And someone who's on our Facebook forum would say, Jonathan George, he's probably watching this. He went on. He has a reputation for going on about his brake disc, but that's something which they actually would have fixed with that. But the reason they fixed that apparently is now a non bespoke component. It's something they can buy off the shelf. And it's a lot cheaper to do that. Right. So it's all about cost savings. Now, there are some nice things on Model 20 year 21, but they're not nice in a way that would make me rush out and buy it. I mean, the faster charging, or the AC charging, great if you live in Europe, and I totally get that. If you live in Europe, it makes the Ipace actually a usable car, because it wasn't really for home charging before. Because you obviously, if you were stuck on a single phase at 3 kilowatts, you aren't going to charge very fast. Whereas now, if you can do 12 kilowatt 3-phase charging, you're going to charge reasonably fast.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I mean, that's a nice addition. Would I use it? Probably not. You know, my home is a single phase 7 kilowatt charger. And publicly, well, you're still not really likely to use 11 kilowatts.
Not that often anyway.
Not in the UK. I mean,
not in the UK. So this is very UK specific.
Yeah.
I mean, Europe is very different. There's mostly 3 phase, mostly 22 kilowatts. So you're probably charging. So it does make a lot of sense to have a higher end to it. The other change, which is something I would like, is the faster battery charging, which obviously has come from the renegotiation of the warranties, because it's basically the same battery packs. There's not really anything different there. They've just changed the BMS ratings on it, and but the warranty still holds. It's not up to Audi e-tron standards, as we were talking about earlier, but that's possibly not a bad thing.
Only time will tell on that.
But having that little bit extra, and obviously the other thing which has changed is the whole PV Pro thing. Now, I like the connected navigation side of that. I think that's really good. I think some really good ideas in PV Pro. Some of the navigation on the screen actually looks good, but some of the things you've lost from that, I don't like. I mean, I like my lower control panel, for example, with all the bits on it. I can switch between. You've lost some of that ability on it. You can only do very limited amounts on the lower the twisting knobs of the heating system.
And I like that screen a lot, like yourself. I find that incredibly useful, because you're not taking away your navigation, for example, to quickly change your other settings or whatever, and also the customization. I prefer the level of homepage customization you can do on the Touch Pro Duo. Now, some of this may come. I mean, PV Pro is at an early stage. I know there's a lot of feedback from Land Rover drivers, Defender drivers, because they've obviously got PV Pro as well, which is going in to hopefully make some changes. There is a team working on PV Pro, so there may well be some of the improvements on this stuff anyway. We may see some big changes coming on it, but yeah, I think that's something which I think will come, but it's a way off yet, and at the moment I don't think I would want to move necessary from what I've got. I think and I know a lot of people complained about the Touch Pro Duo setup and speed and performance, but actually recently, since the more recent updates, it's been perfectly fine. It's an adequate system. What I've discovered is it starts booting up an awful lot earlier now. It boots up basically as soon as you unlock your car. where it used to wait till you press the start button. I think it actually starts booting up if you activate the preconditioning now.
Yes.
To a certain level.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you unlock the door, it starts booting up fully. And then once you're in, it's practically booted up by the time you've started the car.
And also, if you happen to have the 19.2 TCU update, telemetry update, which you should get soon because they've unblocked that update.
I'm still on 14.2, and I've been told that I couldn't even get 18.2. So
well. I mean, the dealers got a notification, I think, last week that 19.2 is now being re-sent out. So to expect it going out to their customers. So I think we'll see 19.2 going out very, very soon to places. It should be next couple of weeks, I think. But I have noticed with 19.2 that the boot up speed has got even better.
Really,
it's almost instant now. You get in the car and it's ready to go. So so I think they've done an awful lot of work on that to try and help it. I mean, I think a lot of the issues we had slow speed were to do with the TCU because it was doing a lot of checks in the background before you actually got started off. So which obviously really didn't need to happen while you were waiting for the screen to boot up. You can have the screen boot up before you got to that point. So so I think it's going to be. I think the whole touch Duo actually became a really good system in the last.
Yeah, I'm actually very, very happy with mine, I'll be honest, and much like yourself, which is, is something they should be slightly concerned about, I think, but much like yourself, I probably would rather hang on to my first edition than switch to an MY21 model.
Yeah. No, I know they're hearing this a lot, and they've got a lot of feedback from a lot of people on the whole thing. So what will happen with model year 22? I don't know. Because this is a component swap in and swap out for some of this stuff. So if you want to put the full driver assist package back in, you could do that relatively easy with a little bit more cost by putting the modules back in, because they've gone down from 2 cameras at the front to 1 camera at the front.
The cameras behind the rear view mirror. Yeah. Used to be 2 in that module. There's now just the 1.
And I haven't heard this from Jaguar sources, but I understand there are licensing differences as well for not having the steering assist in, which is possibly a cost saving. I think this is all again cost savings. I think that they want better margins on the Ipace, which is understandable. You want to do that. So I guess the final big question we need to ask ourselves is what's the future of the Ipace?
Indeed, what is the future of the Ipace? I mean, I think it's more in question now with Ian Callum having moved on. Yeah. I think if Ian Callum was still at the company, it would be more assured for a longer term. However, no car company is going to bin a car that is selling pretty well, 2-3 years after development, because it's been too expensive to develop, and people are still buying. They're not having poor sales. So I think the car is assured, let's say, for the next 5 years, with a minor facelift probably next year or the year after.
22 would make sense with a facelift. It's that sort of cycle you usually get. Exactly. And with having had the minor update this year, then you tend to think that you tend to have that minor update in the last year or so of the life of a model, just to keep it going, and then you have the next version come up.
But I'm not expecting anything too dramatic from the facelift.
No, I wouldn't think that. Yeah. Then the only other thing which may happen is obviously the battery design could change. The architecture allows for more packs or different size packs, so you potentially could change that without impacting too much the vehicle.
I'm fully expecting that. Well, I don't expect the car to change much. I do expect the whole powertrain really to be tweaked quite heavily. I think we'll see different motors, and I think we'll see different battery packs.
Yeah. Now, if you'd asked me this a year ago, I'd have said they'd probably gone for BMW motors, but I think that may have disappeared now with the change of managership at JLR. Obviously, the previous speaker had a lot of contacts with BMW, so I thought that would have been the case. But I think we may stick with Jaguar's own motors, which are very good, and they're certainly the Ipace ones are extremely good. But yeah, so my prediction is very similar to yours. I think 5 years of life, probably only one more model with only one more facelift on it, and then whatever new models start coming out, and the Ipace gets quietly dropped because they won't want to keep paying Magna Steyr to build a car.
Exactly, they don't want to pay Magna Steyr to build a car. They want all of the cars that Jaguar builds to be on a common platform, and what I wouldn't like to see happen is the Ipace to move to that common platform.
No.
I'd rather see it finish its run in its current form than see it compromised going forwards.
I could see us actually having a complete new naming structure coming in with these new cars. I think it would make sense. It's a relaunch, rebrand, so you change the models, like they did when they bought these F-Paces and I.
Indeed,
so I could certainly see that. Anyway, it's been great chatting.
Yes, it's been great to catch up again.
That's really good. So we'll do another one of these probably a bit quicker. So
yes.
My life is easy enough a bit, and I can actually do something. I'm actually even getting around to doing some vlogs now, so I might have a vlog out fairly shortly.
I've got 2 videos waiting to be edited. So
well, I'm just waiting for my car to come back because it went in for service yesterday.
It's just behind you.
Oh no, so it's somewhere there. Not really, but it's been in service for the last couple of days because when they service it, found a problem with the demisting on the wing mirrors, which they're sorting out.
All right.
It's good. Actually, that's one thing I did just really quickly want to mention is if you've had problems with your doors handles retracting in the ice and snow, there is actually a bulletin to the dealers about fixing that, and you can get it repaired under warranty. So if you found that your door handles haven't retracted for some when you've driven off after you've had an ice and snow incident, then that they can actually fix those for you.
Which is nice.
Anyway, we will do this again. And,
we certainly shall.
And see you all soon.
Bye for now. Abba-dabby dude.